There are moments in life that test your patience, your composure, your very sense of who you are. They're usually not the big, cinematic showdowns we see in the movies. No, they're the quiet, insidious cuts of daily life. The subtle shift in the air when you walk into a room, the questions laced with suspicion you didn't earn, the silent judgment that declares, without a single word, that you just don't belong. This phenomenon is often called a microaggression, but there is nothing micro about its impact. For those who live with them, these moments aren't isolated incidents, they're part of a constant, draining battle. Some researchers even describe it as a death by 1,000 cuts. And while the story you're about to hear is a dramatization, it's rooted in the very real and painful experiences of countless people. It's a story about what happens when one of those quiet cuts is met not with rage, but with a cold, hard lesson in power and respect. It's the story of Marcus Thorne, and the day he simply wanted to enjoy the peace he had fought so hard to build. It didn't start with a shout. It started with a question, sharp and misplaced, slicing right through the warm afternoon air. "Excuse me. Can we help you?" The voice was crisp, polite on the surface, but underneath, it carried the heavy weight of presumption. Marcus Thorne let his eyes open slowly. The brilliant blue of the rooftop pool reflected a sky without a cloud. He'd been so close to sleep, lulled by the gentle lapping of water and the distant hum of the city. For a second, he thought about ignoring it, just pretending to be asleep, hoping the intrusion would fade. But he knew it wouldn't. This was a question that demanded an answer, not because it wanted information, but because it asserted authority. He pushed his sunglasses up, his gaze landing on the couple at the edge of the pool deck. They looked like they'd been pulled from a luxury living magazine. A man in his late 50s, polo shirt stretched over a slight paunch, and a woman of a similar age, with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a silk kaftan. They were smiling, but their eyes weren't. Their eyes were scanning him, his swim trunks, the book on his chest, the simple gold band on his finger. They were cataloging him, assessing him, and finding him wanting. Marcus kept his voice neutral, even. "No, thank you. I'm fine." The woman, Susan, stepped forward, her smile tightening. "It's just, this is a residents-only pool. We haven't seen you here before." And there it was. The real question, unwrapped from its polite packaging. "What are you doing here?" Section 1, The Sanctuary. To really feel the weight of that question, you have to understand what this place meant to Marcus Thorne. The building, the apex, wasn't just steel and glass. It was a monument. It was the physical result of a life spent defying expectations. Marcus was the founder and CEO of a tech titan, a company he literally built from a garage, fueled by ramen, caffeine, and an unshakable belief in his own vision. He was a self-made billionaire, a label that felt both good and empty. It validated the years of 100-hour work weeks, the sacrifices, the risks. But it was empty because it never captured the true cost. That cost was paid in rooms where he was the only black face, in meetings where his ideas were ignored, only to be applauded when a white colleague repeated them. It was paid in the constant pressure to be twice as good to get half the credit, a reality many black professionals know all too well. He'd learned to navigate these spaces with a carefully built persona, calm, articulate, non-threatening. He learned, as one black executive put it, to be comfortable being uncomfortable. He mastered the art of silencing that inner voice screaming at the slights, focusing instead on delivering results no one could deny. Buying the majority share in the apex and moving into its penthouse wasn't about ego. It was an act of reclamation. This was supposed to be his sanctuary, the one place on earth he didn't have to be on guard. The rooftop pool, with its panoramic view of the city he'd, in many ways, conquered, was the heart of that sanctuary. It was where he came to decompress, to shed the armor he wore to work, to simply be. He'd earned this space not just with money, but with a lifetime of resilience. And for a few blissful hours, it had been just that. He was home. He was safe. Or so he thought. Section 2, the gathering storm. The couple, Bill and Susan Jennings from the 28th floor, they introduced themselves, didn't leave. They took 2 lounge chairs a short distance away, just close enough for their conversation to be inaudible, persistent static, disrupting the peace. Marcus tried to disappear back into his book, but the words started to blur. He could feel their eyes on him. Every time he shifted or took a sip of water, he felt the weight of their scrutiny. It's a feeling that's deeply familiar to many black people in America, a phenomenon known as living while black. It's the experience of being watched, questioned, or treated with suspicion while doing perfectly normal things, shopping, jogging, or in this case, relaxing by your own pool. It turns everyday life into a series of potential conflicts. Susan's voice, a little louder this time, floated across the deck. The security in this building has really gone downhill. They used to be so much more vigilant. Bill's reply was a low murmur, but the intent was crystal clear. It was a performance for an audience of one. They were talking at him. Marcus's jaw tightened. He knew the strategy. It was a micro-insult, a subtle jab meant to tell him he was out of place, that his presence was a sign of falling standards. This wasn't about security, it was about their comfort. And his presence was making them uncomfortable. He refused to take the bait. He slowly folded the corner of his page, set the book down, and dipped his feet into the cool water, turning his back pointedly toward them. He would not give them the satisfaction of a reaction. He would not let them steal his peace. He focused on the rhythm of the water against the tiles, a mantra of calm against their rising hostility. But the storm they were brewing wasn't going to just blow over. It was gathering strength. Section 3, Rising Action, the Poison of Suspicion. The silence stretched for another 10 minutes, thick and heavy. Marcus kept his eyes on the skyline, but his mind was racing, dredging up a lifetime of similar moments. The security guard following him through a department store in college. The real estate agent, just a few years ago, steering him away from certain neighborhoods, despite his multi-million-dollar mortgage approval. These weren't just annoyances. They were small tears in the fabric of his soul. Researchers call them microaggressions, and their impact is immense. They are a constant drip of poison, accumulating over time, leading to chronic stress and a feeling of being perpetually unsafe. Each time, it forces a draining internal calculation: did that just happen? Am I overreacting? Should I say something? What happens if I do? It's an exhausting mental burden his white neighbors would never have to carry. He was pulled from his thoughts by Bill's voice, now right behind him. "Look," Bill said, dropping any pretense of politeness. "We don't want any trouble. But this is a private facility. If you're not a resident, you need to leave. Now." Marcus turned his head slowly. "And what makes you so sure I'm not a resident?" Susan, now standing beside her husband, chimed in, her voice dripping with condescension. "Oh, please. We know everyone on the upper floors. We've lived here for 5 years. We have a right to feel secure in our own home." The right to feel secure. That was the heart of it. Their security, it seemed, was based on a certain kind of sameness. His presence, the presence of a black man they didn't recognize, was a threat to their narrow, exclusionary world. "I assure you," Marcus said, the ice in his voice becoming more pronounced, "I have every right to be here." "Do you?" Susan challenged. "Because we pay a significant amount in HOA fees for this building's exclusivity. We can't just have anyone wandering in off the street." The insult was breathtaking. Anyone wandering in off the street. He, who had poured more money and sweat into this building than they could imagine, was being reduced to a vagrant. The calm he had so carefully held on to began to fray. A hot surge of anger rose in his chest. He thought of the young black professionals he mentored, their stories of being mistaken for waiters, of having their credentials questioned, of always having to prove they belonged. This wasn't just about him anymore. "You know what," Bill said, pulling out his phone. We're done talking. I'm calling building security. Susan smiled, a thin, triumphant smirk. A very wise decision, dear. They both looked at Marcus, expecting him to panic, to protest. Instead, Marcus simply leaned back, crossed his arms, and said, "Please do." Section 4, the climax, the turning of the tables. The wait for security was a study in contrasts. The Jenningses stood with an air of smug victory, whispering and glancing at Marcus like an exhibit at a zoo. They were confident. They were the established residents. They were, in their minds, in the right. Marcus, on the other hand, projected absolute calm. He'd slipped his sunglasses back on, his stillness a form of defiance. But underneath, a cold fury was hardening into a sharp, clear resolve. He had tried to be peaceful. They had mistaken his calm for weakness. They were about to learn, in a very public and unforgettable way, the difference. Finally, the door hissed open and two uniformed security guards stepped out. One was a young man, looking nervous. The other was older, Frank, the head of security, a man Marcus had spoken to on several occasions. The Jenningses scurried over. "Thank you for coming so quickly," Susan said. "We have a situation. This man," she said, pointing a manicured finger at Marcus, "is trespassing. He refuses to leave." Bill added, "He's been very hostile. We feel quite threatened." Frank, the older guard, looked from the agitated couple to the man sitting calmly in the lounge chair. His eyes widened, first in confusion, and then in dawning horror. He completely ignored the Jenningses and walked directly to Marcus, his posture instantly shifting from authoritative to deferential. "Mr. Thorne!" Frank exclaimed, a flush rising on his neck. "I am so sorry to disturb you, sir. Is everything all right?" The air went still. The Jenningses froze, their mouths hanging slightly open. Marcus slowly took off his sunglasses. He didn't smile. "Actually, Frank," Marcus said, his voice quiet but carrying across the suddenly silent deck, "there is a problem. This couple has been harassing me for the better part of an hour." Frank's face paled. He turned to the Jenningses, his expression now a mask of cold professionalism. "Ma'am, sir, what exactly have you been saying to Mr. Thorne?" Bill stammered, his bravado gone. We didn't recognize him. We thought he was," the unspoken words hung in the air. "We thought he didn't belong." Susan found her voice, though it was now desperate. "Thorne. Wait, as in. Thorne Developments. The name of Marcus's primary holding company. The one whose logo was etched into the lobby doors." Marcus stood up slowly. He was a tall man, and his presence now seemed to fill the entire space. He walked past the stunned guards and stood before the Jenningses. "Not just Thorne Developments, Mrs. Jennings," Marcus said, his voice dangerously soft. "As in Marcus Thorne. Majority shareholder of this building. Chairman of the Residence Board. The man who signs Frank's paycheck. And the man who, ultimately, signs off on the renewal of every lease in this building. Including, I believe, the one for apartment 28B. The silence that followed was profound. It was the sound of a world turning upside down. The sound of assumptions shattering. It was the sound of two people realizing they had just picked a fight with the king in his own castle. Section 5, Falling Action, the Unforgettable Lesson. The smugness had evaporated from the Jenningses' faces, replaced by a ghastly pale shock. Bill's face was a mottled red, a mix of humiliation and stark terror. Their entire world was built on a foundation of assumptions, about wealth, power, and who gets to have it. That foundation had just crumbled. Frank, the security chief, looked mortified and started to apologize again, but Marcus held up a hand. His focus was entirely on the couple. "You know," Marcus began, his voice low but with the cutting edge of a scalpel, "this rooftop, it was designed to be a sanctuary. A place for people to find a moment of peace. I invested millions to create that peace. And in less than an hour, you two managed to poison it. He took a step closer. They both flinched. You didn't see a neighbor. You saw a black man, and your minds filled in a narrative of your own making. A narrative of threat. Of someone who couldn't possibly belong in your space. He gestured around at the deck. You think your HOA fees buy you exclusivity, but what you're really buying is a license for your own bigotry. His words weren't shouted, they were delivered with the calm, irrefutable weight of truth. You wanted to feel secure, he continued, turning their own word against them. Let me tell you about security. Security is not having to justify your existence every time you walk into a room. Security is the freedom from the constant, grinding stress of knowing that someone's perception of your skin color might lead to a confrontation, or worse. He let that hang in the air. You threatened to call security to have me removed, Marcus said. Well, security is here. But they're not here for me. He finally turned away from them and looked at Frank. Frank, please escort Mr. and Mrs. Jennings back to their apartment. I'm sure they would like some time to reflect. He then pulled out his own phone and dialed a single number. Hi, Sarah, it's Marcus Thorne. I'm up at the rooftop pool. Yes, everything is fine. I do, however, need you to pull the file for apartment 28B. The Jennings residence. I want to review their residency agreement and the community code of conduct. We seem to have a rather flagrant violation that needs to be addressed by the board. Immediately. I'll be down in an hour. He hung up. He didn't need to mention eviction. The implication was a guillotine hanging in the air. The message was clear, actions have consequences. Section 6, the consequences. As the guard stiffly led the silent, shell-shocked Jenningses away, a sense of cold, somber justice settled over the pool deck. This wasn't a game that had been won, it was a wound that had been cauterized. The public humiliation for the Jenningses was immediate. The social fallout within the exclusive community of the Apex would be swift and brutal. Word would spread. They would be known not as vigilant protectors, but as the prejudiced fools who harassed their own landlord. But the consequences run deeper. And this is important. What the Jenningses did isn't just rude, it can have serious legal and financial ramifications. The Fair Housing Act expressly prohibits discrimination and harassment in housing based on race. What they saw as protecting their space could legally be defined as creating a hostile environment. The power they thought they had was actually an abuse of privilege, and for once, the system they so confidently tried to use was turning back on them. Their single confrontation by the pool became a microcosm of a larger societal reckoning, underscoring that the right to feel comfortable doesn't supersede another person's right to simply exist. Section 7, Resolution. The hiss of the closing door left Marcus in a profound silence. The pool deck was his again. The sun was still warm, the water still blue. But the peace he came here for felt different. It was tainted, fractured. He walked to the edge of the pool, looking out over the city he'd seen 1,000 times. He had won. He had faced down ignorance and emerged victorious. There was vindication in that. But underneath it, there was a deep, abiding weariness. Why did he have to fight this battle? Why, at the pinnacle of his success, in his own home, was he forced to spend his precious downtime defending his right to be there? The victory felt hollow, because it was a victory in a war he should never have had to fight in the first place. This is a feeling that runs through the stories of even the most successful black executives, a sense of isolation, of being under constant scrutiny, a psychological toll from a world that perpetually questions their legitimacy. It's a key reason many seek to build their own companies, not just for opportunity, but for a respite from the daily grind of systemic bias. Marcus sank back into his lounge chair. He picked up his book but didn't open it, a forgotten anchor to the peace he'd been seeking. He had asserted his power and delivered a lesson. But the cost was a piece of his own tranquility. He had reclaimed his space, but he couldn't erase the memory of its violation. He took a long, slow breath. It was a breath of exhaustion, of frustration, but also of resilience. He had been tested, and he had not broken. This was still his home. And he knew the peace would return. But it would be a harder peace, one he would have to consciously reclaim, one quiet afternoon at a time. CTA. This story, though a dramatization, reflects a reality that is all too common. These acts of prejudice that question a person's right to simply be in a space are not just awkward, they're harmful and exhausting. What are your thoughts on this? Have you ever witnessed or experienced a situation like this? We invite you to share your perspectives in the comments. Your voice is crucial in this conversation. And if you believe in shining a light on these issues, please like this video and subscribe for more stories that demand to be told. Conclusion. This isn't just a story about a millionaire and his pool. It's about the invisible toll of prejudice. It's a reminder that a person's worth, their right to peace, and their place in the world are not determined by the assumptions of others. Marcus Thorne's story is one of quiet strength, of meeting aggression not with equal fire, but with the undeniable weight of truth. It's a lesson that true power isn't about building walls to keep people out, it's about having the grace and strength to tear them down. It's a call for all of us to look past our own biases, challenge our comfortable narratives, and remember that respect is not a privilege to be granted, but a fundamental human right to be honored. Without question. And without exception.